All right, hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in once again to the Black Box Podcast, BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Today we're going to be going back to the case of the Zodiac Killer, one of the kind of more frequently discussed subjects on this channel, and we're going to pay very special attention to an article that was posted on the website realclearlife.com, and I'll hopefully include a link to that in the description box when we're done with the recording. Now, what they were talking about was like, I was trying to find out some more things about Richard Gaikowski, because I mentioned in the previous upload that I am somewhat skeptical about his time in Albany. There's a very big Gaikowski narrative out there that Darlene Ferrin moved to Albany, New York, and quickly Richard Gaikowski followed, and that Richard Gaikowski was working in a newspaper office in the same building where Darlene Ferrin's husband was working. And I was just like, that's a coincidence that's too big to ignore. And I wanted a little more information about Richard Gaikowski. So I was just on Google and I saw this article about kind of a sleuth, I repeat, quote unquote sleuth, that is still trying to solve the Zodiac killer mystery. And I was like, okay, let's learn more about this. It's like it got my attention. I expected to hear some sort of case about, an amateur sleuth who was just very passionate about the Zodiac killer mystery and trying to solve it. But no, it was none other than Tom Voigt of ZodiacKiller.com, and Real Clear Life decided to do an article about him in 2018, which is it's really only about 12 exact months from this recording, like to the day. It came out in March of 2018. It's now March of 2019 at the time of this recording. So it's like, it's like kind of like, all right, let's see what Tom Voigt has to say. In case you can't tell from my tone of voice, I'm not the biggest Tom Voigt fan because, like many people, a lot of people felt that he was really trying to force the narrative too hard on Gaikowski and ignoring a lot of the other suspects. But there's some very big ideas that are mentioned in this article, so I thought we would talk about some of the things associated with just the Zodiac Killer mystery in general. The first thing that they talk about is that mainstream sources have failed the public. This is Tom Voigt talking, and it's a rather kind of insightful remark. I mean, like when they talk about revealing Lawrence Kane and Ross Sullivan on the History Channel, they're sort of saying that those things do more harm than good because what the mainstream sources do is they don't always put out the genuine factual information. And like he's talking about the History Channel, he's talking about things like Dateline and 2020, because one of the things that also comes up is the DNA that was taken from the Zodiac letters, from the stamps, and from the envelope. Because the Zodiac would have had to have licked the stamps to mail them at the time, right? As well as licking the envelope to seal it. So they said they had DNA from the Zodiac killer, which exonerated none other than Arthur Lee Allen. Arthur Lee Allen wasn't mentioned at all in the article by name. That's my own commentary line. They were just talking about the DNA. What Tom Voigt is saying is that the DNA that was collected was not actually from the stamps. This was put out to the general public on 2020. Once again, he's why he's saying mainstream sources are unreliable. They're put out to the general public that they had DNA from the stamps and from the envelope where the killer would have had to have licked to seal it. They're just like, no, absolutely not. What they had was touch DNA. Like, this just means that somebody touched the envelope. It could have been the mailman. It could have been somebody at the mail processing center, any postal worker. It could have been Joe Schmo, Joe Sixpack, Joe somebody. I mean, they're just sort of saying that they don't have any definitive DNA about the Zodiac Killer now. So it's like, what do you really make of that? I mean, that's a very, very bold statement because one of the largest things that is that is not connecting Arthur Lee Allen to this case is that he was exonerated by DNA. That is probably the absolute biggest thing. But bear in mind, though, the fingerprints and the side palm print that were on the paper that is inside the envelope, which no postal worker should have been touching, did not match anything about Arthur Lee Allen. Like, we're talking very specifically about the side palm print. They compared Arthur Lee Allen's other letters to that of the Zodiac killer. And we've given a few possibilities about how he could have done that. He could have had a partner working with him. Or if you actually want to entertain the Robert Graysmith stuff, like Arthur Lee Allen was ambidextrous, he committed the murders with his left hand and wrote the ciphers and the letters with his right hand. I don't personally subscribe to that theory, just throwing it out there. But the reason why that this upload is titled Zodiac Killer, Legends and Fantasy is because Tom Voigt also made a statement in this interview, mind you, that I don't necessarily agree with when they're sort of saying that the Zodiac Killer, D.B. Cooper, the Black Dahlia are crimes and criminals and cases that are treated like fiction, even though they're reality, even though they're from real life. People like to treat them as if they're fictional stories. And they're sort of talking about how a lot of people are not necessarily aware that those things might be based on, true stories. And I mentioned that when I was in the movie theater once and we saw a preview for the Jake Gyllenhaal film Zodiac, and the guy sitting next to me was like, "Is that real? Is that based?" He thought it was a fictional story until he saw like the thing at the end based on a true story or something like that. He had never heard of it before. So it's like, I don't really agree though that that cases like DB Cooper, Black Dahlia, and the Zodiac Killer are treated like fiction. What I would say is more notable is that people often try to superimpose themselves onto the case, and they try to sort of look at them because there's some sort of unknown information about this, because there are very big things that the general public does not know about the case. They can superimpose their own story onto it. In short, they try to manipulate real life to fit their own narrative. Look at the case of Jack Torrance. Oh, it was my stepfather. Look at the case of Earl Van Best. It was my dad. Or that one woman who says that, the woman who says she was also the illegitimate daughter of John F. Kennedy. I'm not sure her name. I believe she implicated her father in that. That would be another case that we would never cover on this channel because it just sort of seems like something too far out, too wacky, and also most likely not true. So we don't really need to investigate anything that's kind of just a wild goose chase. But the whole point is, people like that are just forcing their own narrative onto the case, and they're really trying to kind of force what they believe could be about themselves onto the case. So it's not exactly that they're treating these things as fiction. The Black Dahlia, D.B. Cooper, and the Zodiac Killer, and other things, example. I mean, we mentioned the Texarkana Moonlight murders on this channel before. Many, many unsolved crimes. People try to perhaps force their own sort of belief system onto the case. And in the very specific examples that we mentioned about Jack Torrance and Earl Van Best and that woman who says she's the daughter of JFK, they're trying to put themselves into the story, making themselves a character in the story. But that doesn't mean that they're treating it as fiction. It means they're superimposing their real life onto this true crime case. It's like it's something a little bit different. People are trying to manipulate the story to make themselves part of it. So I think that's what's really happening with a lot of the Zodiac Killer things out there. And they talk about people like the relatives of Jack Torrance and the relatives of Earl Van Best who are coming forward and saying that my family member was the Zodiac Killer. And one point where I might agree with Tom Voigt is when he says that the Zodiac Killer was most likely not somebody's Uncle Bubba and his family member got a book deal. I think I have to agree completely. I think there are a lot of far out things when it comes to the cases of Earl Van Best and Jack Torrance, and somebody's like, this person that I'm connected to was the Zodiac Killer, and here's a very kind of long, blown out reason why in this book length form, which is done for profit and doesn't always have to be a family member. In the case of Louis Myers, his friend Randy Kenny claimed that Myers wanted him to write a book and give the proceeds to the victims' families. I'm not sure if that book came out or not, but that's not even a family member. Those guys are just friends. A friend who claimed he heard a deathbed confession. So a lot of people, once again, are taking their own lives and trying to force it into the case. And that's what I think one of the real things that is clouding a lot of people's judgment. I mean, that also doesn't mean that these people are genuinely lying. They just might actually believe that this could be true. It's just, I don't necessarily know how valid the claims are. Because one of the biggest reasons why I get pulled into true crime cases is because there is a definitive answer there. It's not just like, this is my opinion about this, I like this, I don't like that. There is a definitive answer about what happened. And there's something that really happened with the Zodiac Killer mystery back in 1968 and 1969, as well as all the letters that continued up until, what was it, 1978 was the last Zodiac letter, although a lot of people don't believe that that was genuine. So one of the things we have to be aware of is mainstream sources, like even the television shows, the History Channel, 2020, they might not always present some of the most specific information that is correct. And also, people are trying to write books about the case. People are just trying to put books out there because they feel like they want to kind of be in the spotlight and something like that. People do things like that, and there are a lot of books out there about the Zodiac Killer. And I mean, if we want to get back though to the things with Richard Gaikowski and Arthur Lee Allen, like I mentioned, Arthur Lee Allen is kind of the prime suspect in the Zodiac mystery overall. However, they referred to Richard Gaikowski as a lesser known suspect in this article, and I was like, no way. After Arthur Lee Allen, Richard Gaikowski is most definitely the prime suspect. And I think a lot of people would sort of come to that conclusion. I've done numerous uploads about Richard Gaikowski on this channel. He's very well known through the Zodiac communities and like the Zodiac sort of online research community. A lot of people examine Richard Gaikowski with a fine-tooth comb. But one of the reasons why he was exonerated is separate from something I mentioned in the past. Like I claimed investigators saw his passport and determined that he was out of the country for the Lake Herman Road murders of 1968. Well, apparently they also compared his handwriting samples to that of the Zodiac Killer, and they determined that Gaikowski's handwriting absolutely did not match the Zodiac's handwriting. So, it's once again, you kind of got that gut instinct that yeah, it's possible that Richard Gaikowski could be the Zodiac Killer. Yeah, it's possible that Arthur Lee Allen could be the Zodiac Killer, but the forensic evidence doesn't seem to support them. When you look at somebody like Ross Sullivan, his handwriting definitely does appears very similar to the Zodiac, and you don't need a mainstream source to really tell you that. You can just kind of look at the letters that the Zodiac had, the primary sources, and you can look at Ross Sullivan's handwriting, and you're like, yeah, that's pretty similar. Ross Sullivan, I was just thinking about it while I was taking a walk today, that, with Ross Sullivan, he really does match up a lot to just all of the things, like, kind of the MO. He sort of fits the description. He fits the personality type that would be involved with this. Just the kind of shady personality, history of mental problems. There could be so many things, but a lot of people are encouraging me. Like the guys who are leaving the comments on the upload, the people, guys, girls, everybody leaving the comments on the upload are telling me that they most likely think that Ross Sullivan was the Zodiac Killer, or Ross Sullivan murdered Sherry Joe Bates and the Zodiac Killer was a different person. So no matter what, it seems like Ross Sullivan is the prime suspect in some true crime activity that happened in Riverside, California, 1966. and then, of course, to the Zodiac murders, 1968, 1969. And this was the first time, actually, when I was thinking about, like, why was the Zodiac killer never captured? And it was when I was first introduced to the suspect, Ross Sullivan, when I was like, okay, maybe the Zodiac was never caught because he died in 1977. Wouldn't that have answered a lot of things? What I would also say, though, one more thing coming away from this article that was written by RealClearLife.com, interviewing Tom Voigt, is that Voigt mentions another suspect that he believes could very likely be the Zodiac killer, and that person's name is Watterson. I think it's something like George Russell Tucker, when he's just attributing his own pseudonym or moniker to the suspect. His real name isn't Watterson, the same way that Tucker's real name isn't Tucker. It's just like trying to disguise the suspect for a variety of reasons. And we've talked about that on this channel before. So, I'd really like to learn more about this suspect, who seems to fit everything as well. And I'll post a link to the article from realclearlife.com. They don't give away much, so it's going to take a little bit of research to find more about this suspect, Watterson. But, I mean, that's what we kind of do on this channel. And I would really like to learn more about what they have to say about him. Well, will the Zodiac Killer mystery ever be solved? I'd say that 99% chance it's possible, but there's always that 1% chance that there's going to be some doubt, wiggle room. There's going to be people who don't believe the finding no matter what. But it's like, oh, excuse me, a lot of talking. My voice is a little rough today, so you have to excuse me. What I would say, though, is that Arthur Lee Allen and Richard Gaikowski get mentioned an awful lot. But what I would say about them is, maybe people do force the narrative a little too much on those two individual suspects. And it's like, you get the creeps from both Allen and Geik. Those guys are very creepy. It's like, I mean, I always said that about Richard Gaikowski. It's just like, you just get chills when you read some of those things about... I'm not going to be able to continue this recording much longer. You get chills when you read some things about Gaikowski. But what I would say, though, is we always need to in mind that there are over 1,500 suspects with the Zodiac Killer. So, the biggest reason why people have had a problem with Tom Voigt is that they accuse him of trying to force the narrative, railroading Gaikowski, for lack of a better term, as well as also maybe not paying attention to certain suspects that he could have or should have. But anyway, what do you think? What do you think about everything we've discussed today? What do you think about how people view the Zodiac Killer mystery? And, like, do people kind of treat it as some sort of fantasy? Or do they sort of try and superimpose themselves onto the case, the way that I suggested? What do you think? If you have anything to say at all, please drop a comment below. Please excuse my annoying coughing in the middle. Sorry about that. And I would love to hear some comments from you. If you like this upload, you can hit the like button. If you want to subscribe, please subscribe. But most importantly, drop some